All right, it's 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Another week, in Hedera, HBAR, Hashgraph, all of the H things. And it's been an interesting week. It's funny because I usually put the kind of summary thread rundown of the news together on Friday night and Saturday morning and get it up by noon on Saturday and stuff. And it was one of those weeks where today I found myself adding a bunch of items to the thread randomly as kind of the day rolled on. There was a bunch of stuff that went live today, a bunch of chatter about different things. So yeah, part of the reason I do this on Sunday is because I feel like things kind of go a little bit quiet leading up into the week, but no, Sunday, I was adding things to the news thread. Felt like right up until I was going live, making a couple notes here. And things are still chooching along. I mean, things haven't really slowed down. I mean, we can talk about some numbers, but I mean, right now, it was for a bit there, it was looking like the crypto space overall was pretty committed to it being a bear market. Now, I don't really know what the sentiment is. People, we had a little bit of a ramp up there. We cooled down. We didn't see new lows. So it's kind of 50-50 again of what's going on. Now, I don't think anyone's thinking that we're going to see a massive move up or anything like that. I think more what it's about is, are we going to overtake some of those recent supports? Are we going to find new ground? And, all I'll say is it's a little less, a little more optimistic than was a couple weeks ago, which is cool. But again, you never know. And we got a cool show today. We're going to have Tyler, CTO of HashPack, on to talk about ledger staking. We got a bunch of news to talk about. We just had some stuff break in regards to kind of Ashfall and a TikTok influencer with video games and comics and all sorts of stuff. We also had some interesting insights shared just about some things that popped up about Davos and also payments in Australia. Hedera taking over the payment rails of Australia. What's going on there? Well, we'll find out. There's a bunch of other stuff. So we got a lot to dive into. So good evening from Ottawa, Canada, everyone. My name is Brandon Davenport, and I'm a developer, artist, and creative agency owner at Dirksen & Davenport Incorporated. And like all of you, I'm a Hashgraph enthusiast, and I created this Twitter community and weekly spaces. So we've got our own spot to stay up to date, get connected, share knowledge and insights. One quick note on the Twitter community. I've noticed that Twitter communities overall, there's been a ton of spam. A lot of people sharing some fun news about some kind of, online store or something. And I don't know if those people are real. I don't know if the online store is real. But what I do know is it's spam. So what I've done is on the Twitter community, I've just made it so if you join the Twitter community, I or one of the moderators will get you approved within, a day or two. It sucks, but it's going to keep it a lot cleaner. It's going to keep it, low noise. We've got some folks from Swirlds in there who are moderators. So it's all gravy. It's all good. Just know that going forward, when you join, you might have to wait a little bit before you get in, but once you're in, you're in. And welcome to Hashgraph News and Rumors, episode 62. Ledger is coming. It's coming, folks, where we talk about the top stories covering everything related to HBAR and Hedera. Hashgraph every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time, this day, every week. This is a top-level overview of the week's news, and you can check out the thread pinned to the top of the spaces to take a deeper dive into each story. Also, click the little comment button in the bottom right. You can leave a comment. I'll see it. If there's some breaking news or something interesting I should mention, let me know. And also share the spaces. The more the merrier. Let's get tuned in. Let's get plugged in. And also, too, The show continues to grow from hundreds of listeners to thousands. I continue to invest the time needed to bring value to the expanding Hedera community, and will always do this. I love doing this. But if you'd like to support the show, you can send an HBAR donation to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. If the community wants this show to go to another level, we can do it together. That's enthusiast.hbar. I really appreciate your support. Let's talk about some stuff happening on the old Hashgraph here. We'll look at prices, but also I want to look at the actual mainnet about what's happening, because we saw something interesting happen on the 27th, which was Friday, that I wanted to just quickly highlight. So as most folks are familiar, we saw TPS, that's transactions per second, rise to well over 500, which was great. We had a dip down as we approached the second half of January to about 350, 300, which was, there was a few different reasons for that. One was Swirlds reworked the gossip algorithm, not the gossip about gossip algorithm, just the gossip algorithm. And we saw a heightened volatility in time to finality. And time to finality is how long does it take for a transaction to reach finality? And they kind of went, we need to rework that a bit. They flipped it back, and we saw TPS go back up to well over 500, approaching 600 average. And basically, as we know, the use case that's driving this TPS is Atma.io from Governing Council member Avery Dennison. And their use case, as I understand, uses the time to finality number to kind of govern throughput. So as time to finality goes up, their throughput goes down. There is some kind of relation to that for their use case in particular. But on the 27th, at, I don't know what time zone this is at, maybe it's GMT or UTC, but at a particular time, 1600, we saw the TPS go from an average of 550 down to about 300. And at the same time, at that exact kind of window of time, we saw a spike in time to finality up to 9 seconds, then right back down. So something obviously happened on the 27th, and we continue to see the network churn away at just over 300 TPS. Time to finality is still under 4.5 seconds. So, it looks okay. It looks like things are going okay, but we obviously have a reduction in TPS over the past, I'd say, 48 hours. So something to keep an eye on. But, at the same time, I'm not going to turn my nose up at 300 TPS. It's great. Now, one thing we did see is the number of accounts at about, again, I don't know what time zone the Metrica dashboard is in. Doesn't tell us. But a couple hours ago, maybe about, what would it be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About 8 hours ago, we saw the accounts created per hour go from about 150 to about 1,200, 1,500, which is quite a sizable increase. And we can pretty much say this is most likely due to the launch of the Ashfall comic NFTs, which we'll talk about later. Now, are those NFTs being created? Are those actual user accounts being created? I don't know. If they are, actual user accounts being created, that's 1,200 per hour. That's pretty great. That puts us at just over 1.6 million total accounts on the network. And I did do a poll asking the community, how long till we hit 2 million Hedera mainnet accounts? 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? Well, about over 40% said 1 month, which is, I think, maybe doable. 2 months, 30%. So if we're going from 150 accounts created per hour to like 1,200 or 1,500, yeah, you could safely say that. But I think that there's a good chance within the next 30 or 60 days we could hit 2 million accounts, and I know that that's a major KPI for Hedera and the network. So that's pretty big. Now let's take a quick look at what's going on with HBAR. what's going on with some of these other HTS assets, these Hedera token service assets. So yeah, if we look at HBAR, obviously for a while there, if we go back to kind of early January, down in that sub 4 cents area, obviously not super duper duper great. But, if we're establishing a floor, if the quote bottom was in, who knows? But we did, alongside Bitcoin, see a walk up from that, again, sub 4 cent area all the way up. We touched just about 8 cents, which is obviously a substantial rise. And now we're testing that previous 6 cent floor. We have an established floor of about 6 cents. And that goes back to, May 2022. And that was a floor. We flipped that to resistance in the fall. So that's really, when we look at the price action of HBAR on the upside, that's really what we're looking for, is we're looking to flip that 6 cents back to support. We tested it once. Are we going to test it again? We'll have to see. But I mean, at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that we're just going to follow Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin is generally just going to follow the S&P 500. So everything's so intertwined right now. But we are seeing, very recently, some strong moves to the upside. Is this a retest? People have called this a bull flag, all these different types of things. It's really, really hard to say. There's not a lot of testing of support, and we're seeing continued moves to the upside. So we'll have to see. In my mind, I'm just sticking to dollar cost averaging. But that brings us to the next thing. This is the really interesting thing when we look at the price of assets and stuff like that. And again, this isn't financial advice. What you're trying to do is buy things that are good products that you believe in, good services, good technologies that you believe in at a good price. That's all you can do. But if we look at the Saucer Swap analytics page, the price action over 24 hours for some of these HTS assets, we've got Sauce up 4.2%, actually 4.20%. Nice. Headstarter up 5.5%. We've got Lucky Token up 3.5%. We got Galaxy up 4.2%. We got Staters Token up 5%. We got Dovu up 6.5%. We got Jam just pretty much up not even 1%. HBAR Suite down 2%. So, those are the ones of note. And, I think that it's a very interesting time. I'm noticing a lot of conversation around some of these HTS assets, some of these lower market cap coins. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see, what's going on. Because when you really think about it, these are the things that could potentially attract some attention. Of course, we always talk about the next bull run being driven by utility. HBAR seems like it fits the bill pretty well. We'll have to see. Who knows when that bull run is going to be? Could be this year. Who knows? But also, it's interesting because a lot of these HTS assets, from a technical standpoint, act in the same ways an HBAR does. They don't require, a smart contract per se. They could potentially be very appealing. So there's all of these different factors that come into play. And we look at the fundamentals of the network. They've changed quite a bit. So we are really dealing with kind of a new situation in HBAR world. And we're really seeing that because a lot of the ways that folks outside of our little Hashgraph bubble look at the network has changed as well. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But it's less and less ignored, right? It's a little more noisy. So that's just kind of top of mind for me. And I mean, again, I'm not going to go into a bunch of stuff when it comes to price and everything like that. We're not seeing a whole lot. We are seeing, again, some of these HT assets make some interesting moves. HBAR is rocking and rolling with Bitcoin. So, just the best thing you can do is just kind of keep an eye on it and keep, look at that 6 cent level. If you're watching HBAR price, does that flip to support? that would be really great if it did. If it doesn't, then we'll have to take a bit of a closer look to see what's going on. But I don't want to delay this. This is a big story. It's something that we've been waiting on for a long time. I feel like, when I look at this, I often see the same thing when it came to Coinbase happening with this now, where we see people tweeting every single day asking for Ledger to support, HBAR staking. It's a big thing. I know a lot of people with hardware wallets, and specifically Ledger, and the 6.5%, whatever it is, APY on native staking on Hedera is really, really appealing for a lot of people. I'm going to have the CTO of HashPack, Tyler, pop up here, but it's really a top of mind for the whole community because it really hits at the core. We'll talk a little bit about how staking on Hedera is really different from other networks. We'll talk a little bit about what HashPack is working on in some other areas, but we'll focus on where we've been with staking via Ledger devices on Hedera, why it's important, and what could be happening over the next 2 months. Most folks are familiar with HashPack, but if you're new to the space, I'm going to introduce you to Tyler. So a well-known HBAR community member, Tyler is the CTO of HashPack and is responsible for quite a few user experience innovations in the Hedera ecosystem and the broader Web3 industry. He, along with May and the rest of the HashPack team, have been busy since their launch over a year ago. Here's a quick recap. Since going live, they've empowered the NFT ecosystem with secure trade, supercharged ecosystem development with HashConnect, helped spearhead efforts for HIP 412 NFT metadata standards, worked with LG, received a grant from the HBAR Foundation, collaborated with Saucer Swap, Hashport, and Stater Labs on DeFi, added support for native staking, launched their Android app, added in wallet token swaps, launched a new dApp browser, finally announced a new iPhone app, and most recently supported email logons, which we'll talk a little bit about. And then heading into 2023, obviously a major focus for them is this Ledger staking stuff, and it's really the most requested feature in the Hedera community. It's been a long road, but with recent news, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and today we're going to unpack a little bit about this. So, Tyler, I'm really, it's been 62 episodes. I don't think I've had HashPack on the show yet as a guest, which is kind of surprising, but it's so awesome to have you here. We've spoken in the past, but we haven't really had a chance to kind of unpack some of this awesome stuff you guys are working on. How are you doing? It's Sunday. We're getting ready for another week. What's new?
Hey man, nice to be here. Big fan of the show, so it's exciting to actually get to be on here. I'm looking forward to kind of unpacking all this staking stuff, and looking forward
Love
to
it. It's a long-time listener, first-time caller. I dig it. So obviously at the top of the show, I was talking about TPS and all these different things going on with the network. As the CTO of HashPack, you're definitely in the eye of the storm. I'm really interested to know, what are your thoughts on the massive shift in TPS and the response from the folks outside the Hedera community? Because I know that, and this was something that I was going to talk about later, but maybe we can unpack it a little bit. We've seen people from, Reddit to GitHub to all sorts of different areas, Twitter, talking about how some of these over 90% of these transactions on the network are the Hedera consensus service. They maybe don't understand that they're actual crypto transactions and not just something that you could compare to Solana. And we've seen these discussions evolve. So it's kind of curious of what's your thoughts and excitement around these fundamental changes of the network? And maybe do you have any takes on these conversations happening outside the community, kind of looking at the network from the outside in?
It's pretty obvious that it's kind of just a misunderstanding for the most part on kind of the people criticizing the TPS being mostly consensus messages. Like, if you do just a little bit of reading, it becomes pretty obvious that it's not consensus in the same way that other kind of contexts like that word mean stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think it's great that the kind of mythical step function is starting to materialize here. And yeah, I think is long overdue. And people seem to be either extremely excited about it or extremely critical of it. So yeah, it's interesting times, but it's only going to get better.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think we're realizing more and more as a community that Hashgraph as a technology really is a pretty disruptive technology. So, with disruptive technologies, it's like you can love it or hate it, but you can't really ignore it. So, we've got people's attention, for better or for worse. So, we're entering kind of into a new phase. And like you said, I mean, hopefully people kind of load up YouTube, crack a book, learn a little bit about what's going on, and maybe kind of go, oh, this is interesting. And I think we're starting to see a little bit about that. But I want to kind of really dive into what we're here to talk about, which is staking, ledger, all these different types of things people are talking about. But maybe just to kind of kick things off with this discussion, like, staking on the Hedera network is very different from other networks and what people are used to. I was curious to know, like, maybe you could explain to people maybe listening that are new to Hedera, the network, how staking is different on this network in comparison to, other L1s.
Yes, sure. I'm not 100% familiar with staking on a whole lot of other kind of chains. I'm pretty like Hedera first, but in general, so staking is like it's an account level setting, like it's a network level feature, and so what that means is that you choose the node that you want to stake your account to, and then every 24 hours you get rewards, and that's basically it. You just click it and it's done. Your HBARs are not locked up. They're not, they're fully available at all times. And anytime you send HBAR to or from your account, it updates that staking balance automatically. So that's a pretty big question I get a lot is like, I sent some, how do I stake it? And the answer is it's just automatically done. You get at the moment it's about 6.5% a year. I believe that eventually that will change depending on like the node that you're staked to. It's like uptime and stuff, so it kind of incentivizes nodes to be like healthy as much as possible. And yeah, I mean it's a pretty straightforward system once you kind of wrap your head around it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. It's not really staking your HBAR; it's just staking your account. Also, too, John, I see you down there. I'll bring you up shortly to talk about some ISO 20022 stuff. But here's where we get into ledger stuff. So, as Tyler was talking about, you stake your Hedera account, kind of set it and forget it, and you have to do this with a hot wallet, right? Which is the Chrome extension, the web app, the iOS app, the Android app. And for many folks in the crypto space that need that higher level of security, the first step is obviously you get a cold wallet or a hardware wallet, like, a ledger. And that's probably where most people would store their biggest, stack, their biggest bag of HBAR. And unfortunately, people can't stake the HBAR in a HashPack that's using Ledger currently. And a lot of people have been tweeting about this and all these different types of things. And I think that there's some confusion about how it's implemented. I know that you can do it via Ledger on other networks and those different types of things. So maybe Tyler, when Hedera launched staking, obviously you guys had it supported in your wallet. But obviously, it takes companies, third-party companies, time to integrate these types of things. But we've also seen a delay in Hedera getting listed on Coinbase or all these different types of things. So I think my question is it a situation where a hash graph is so different from a blockchain that implementing this networks features into applications and hardware that traditionally would use blockchain networks or stuff like that. Like, is that an element to this, or is it just a case of, Hedera is not an incredibly popular network yet, and it's not a massive priority, so things just kind of take time? I'm curious of like how much of it is kind of a technical learning curve versus just, what's the most popular one that we're going to build in?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting question. It's sort of all of the above. So let me kind of set the stage for what the exact situation is. So the Ledger device it's like a USB stick, right? It has software running on it that Ledger made. But the applications that run on top of Ledger for these specific blockchains are not necessarily themselves made by Ledger. So like the Hedera app on Ledger, for example, is not made by Ledger. It's made by Launchbadge, which is a contracting company that Hedera has hired to make this Hedera application on the Ledger device. They're also responsible for the JavaScript SDK, and so it's not necessarily even Ledger that's dragging the ball on this. It just took a while to kind of get the work done in the Hedera application on Ledger to enable this stuff. And the reason for that is kind of, like you said, it's not a typical kind of blockchain. Like, it's not just a smart contract. Like, not everything is a smart contract, right? So it's kind of, again, I'm not the one kind of working on this, so my details are a bit fuzzy, but yeah, I think it just takes more work to implement these things. And like, they've been working on this since kind of before staking was public. So like, it's been in progress for a while. It moves slow, essentially. Yeah.
Right. So that makes more sense. And maybe I and some other people have kind of oversimplified the situation, where how I've been viewing it is, okay, we've got Hedera, we've got Ledger, and there's apps on our network like HashPack that want to use the hardware more extensively, and Ledger and Hedera have to kind of get things worked out and all these different types of things. But really what it's about is there's third-party contractors, there's all these other folks involved where they kind of all have to work together. They have their own timelines, and things just kind of have to sync up, and they kind of take time. And that's really interesting what you said about this being, they've started working on this before staking went live. So, and also too, I have to say that Ledger has been very, as vocal as they can be about this, responding to people's inquiries on Twitter and all these different types of things, letting people know what's going on. And so with your most recent update through HashPack, well, I don't mean like updates the app, but just update on Twitter, you've mentioned that this functionality should be coming in about 2 months. You guys have completed the work that you need. And not only are people going to be able to stake their HBAR in the way that they're used to, like you said, but also it's going to add support for HTS tokens, like the ones that we talked about, that I was talking about earlier, and also NFTs. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what kind of other functionality you guys are going to bring to Ledger devices once things kind of get underway.
Yeah, sure. So basically there's about 3 types of transactions that are going to be supported with the next update. So it'll be token associate, token disassociate, and account update. And the account update one is what is required for staking, since you're staking your account to a node. And so with that, like NFTs are tokens, so you'll be able to associate NFT tokens and send and receive them from your ledger. Just as a kind of caveat to this, so you won't be able to sign smart contracts or So like you won't be able to like swap stuff directly from your ledger. You won't be able to like list stuff on Zeus, for example, since that requires a token allowance transaction, which I don't think is being included in this. But yeah, that's kind of the high level of what's going on.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. So really, like we took a baby step with, getting support for HBAR and Ledger. Now we're taking another step, but there's still a way to go. But what we've asked for is staking, and we're going to get a couple little extra goodies, which is cool. And this brings me to my next question. I don't know what exact transactions Secure Trade uses, but would Secure Trade be something that would be supported on a Ledger device using HashPack?
That's a great question. I don't think so. I'd have to test it. I don't think so, but maybe like a 10% chance, maybe.
You heard it here first, folks. We got a 10% chance we're going to have Ledger Secure Trades. It was just something I thought of. I was like, I wonder what kind of transaction Secure Trade uses. Maybe it'd be possible. So that'd be really interesting to see, but definitely not something promised from you guys. I just pulled it out of my ass. So it was kind of interesting. But here's another question on this, because now, like, when we get to when we get past these 2 months, it goes live, everyone's happy, hip hip hooray. What do I do as a user? Is it a situation where I log into my HashPack that's using my ledger and it just looks different, right? I no longer have the red text that says NFTs aren't supported, and I just kind of continue using it as usual and things just work and I can stake and everything's fine? Is there any action that's going to be needed on the user's part? Any kind of updates to their account that they're going to have to make? Or will it just, or will they have to update their Ledger device, the Hedera app on the Ledger device? I'm curious to see if you guys have any clarity on what steps, if any, users are going to have to take when this comes into effect.
Yeah, you'll likely have to update the firmware on your Ledger device. Yeah, you'll have to do that, or possibly just the Hedera app on there. And then once you do that, everything should just work once you log into HashPack with your Ledger. There may be a couple other things that need to be disabled, like Secure Trade or whatever else we kind of find when we're testing and unblock these UIs. But it should be pretty seamless.
Okay, so that's what you're saying is if there's anything required, just be updating the Hedera app on the Ledger, maybe updating the firmware. But on HashPack's side, it's really just essentially front end updates for you guys. There's nothing really that anyone's going to have to do in their HashPack wallet.
Correct. Yeah, you'll just have to get the latest update from HashPack too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Okay, so I get, like, that's kind of, that's staking. I mean, it sounds like we're gonna need those 2 months for you guys to figure out actually what's possible with this update from Ledger and what you can do with these 3 transaction types, and understand what some future roadmap items could be. But it seems pretty straightforward. It seems like unpacking this is just kind of, we're getting staking, we're getting a couple little extra goodies. You're not going to have to do a whole lot to make it work. And that's really cool. So I'm excited about that. Now, I want to move on to something else, because this is a big thing that I don't think can be overshadowed. Is something I brought up when I was introing you, was Secure Trade. I think Secure Trade is like a really integral part of the NFT space. And I know that you guys are going to be coming out with Secure Trade 2.0. And I know that currently Secure Trade is great because you can transfer NFTs for HBAR, which is great. Obviously, we have room to grow. So I'm curious with the new version of Secure Trade. I've seen some updates about it, but I want to maybe give you a chance to maybe intro Secure Trade 2 and what people might be able to do with it.
Yeah. So for those unaware, Secure Trade is it's essentially a multi-sig asset transfer. So you say I want to trade this NFT for X amount of HBAR. It gives you a code. You give that code to somebody else. They input it and they say, "Yep, I agree to this." And then it does the trade. It's called an atomic swap, which means multi assets being swapped in a single transaction. So this kind of came about from just seeing people getting like ripped off by people they were like, "Send me this NFT, I'll send you this much HBAR," and then they just never sent the HBAR, which is not really in the spirit of trustlessness. So right now, Secure Trades is just NFT for HBAR. We're working on kind of expanding that to just be like a free-for-all of asset types. So, tokens, NFTs, HBARs, any combination to from, it doesn't matter. And yeah, that's where we're going. It's mostly done. Like I'd say like 90% done. Just have to, the thing with Hedera is all these royalties that are built into the chain, and just parsing them is a real pain. So we're just making sure we get that all right, so that users don't get surprised by like a 10% royalty on this trade. Like, we want to display every single fee involved in the process, so people know what they're agreeing to.
Right, that makes sense. Now, let me, because again, Secure Trade is so important to our ecosystem and community, and I think that expanding it in this way is going to be huge. And I wanted to run maybe a few examples by you of what a new Secure Trade could look like. So, for example, if I have an NFT now, I can only kind of ask for HBAR. But what if I, with the new version of Secure Trade, would I be able to do something like offer an NFT and ask for some sauce token, some Dovu token, and some USDC?
Yes.
Okay, really cool. Now, here's another question. Would I be able to do a Secure Trade and not have any NFTs involved? So, for example, if I wanted to say to somebody, "Hey, let's do I'll give you some sauce and HBAR for USDC and Jam or something." Could you maybe do something like that?
You sure can.
That's really, really cool. And the final thing would be, I've got a couple cool NFTs. You've got a couple cool NFTs. Let's keep the money out of it. Let's just swap some NFTs and call it a wash. Would I be able to do that?
Of course.
That's really interesting. So it opens up this whole dynamic of off-market activity for really any asset on Hedera, which is really, really interesting. And I think that I really want people to start thinking about, because I think just as the original version of Secure Trade had a huge effect on the dynamic of this community, I think that this new version of Secure Trade is the same kind of thing is going to happen. People are going to kind of go, "Oh, okay, I can move all these things without having to trust the other party." And that's really going to be interesting. So here's another cool update that you did that, again, I think is really important when it comes to growing the ecosystem, is the ability to create a HashPack wallet with an email address, right? And this is using a piece of infrastructure called Magic Link that's used by a lot of different Web3 companies. I think Turtleman was using it at one time. And I know that so many different people use them. And basically what you've done is you've integrated this in with HashPack. So you can go to HashPack, create a new wallet with an email, log in with your email. I'm guessing the point of authentication and security would be your email address. So you'd obviously want to have a strong password and two-factor authentication set up on your email. But it makes it so you don't have to manage your own, private keys and stuff to access your wallet. So I'm curious, and I think, maybe we'll take an opportunity just really quick here to touch on the email login stuff. How does that actually work, right? You're not using your private key to log in, you're using your email. I'm curious, with you building this feature, how does it kind of work on the back end? Like, what actually happens when you create the wallet and log in? I'm curious.
Yeah, great question. So Magic Link stores your private keys on the Amazon secure key management system. There's a lot of kind of technical reasons like how this works, but essentially it's like encrypted on these security modules in Amazon's cloud, and only you have the like credentials to kind of decrypt it. And so the keys are actually never in HashPack. So the way signing works is it gets sent to like your transaction gets sent to the cloud to be signed, and then the signed transaction is then returned and executed by us. So HashPack never even sees your keys. And yeah, it's been like audited and everything. There's a great write-up on the Magic Link site about the security that explains it in a much better way than I can on a Spaces, but it's really legit, and we've seen a lot of success from this feature. Like, people seem to really like it.
Okay, that's awesome. So it's something that's audited. It's something that's used very widely. Is this kind of feature used on other networks where you type in your email address and have your private keys handled in this same way?
Yeah. Hedera is a recent addition for them. I believe the HBAR Foundation was talking to them about it and kind of massaged a deal out there to get them to add it. And but yeah, they support a bunch of networks. It's super easy to kind of implement. And I actually suggest, if anyone's looking to like build something and they don't want like to implement a wallet, look into Magic Link. It's the perfect kind of solution for kind of more invisible crypto use cases where the user doesn't even need to know they're using crypto. Like they actually, like Magic Link, I think it started not using crypto at all. It was just a login solution. And then I guess they kind of pivoted away to crypto, and yeah, it's a great system.
That's awesome. I love that. So I have two more questions for you. So kind of, again, changing gears, you recently launched the HashPack iOS app. We all know the struggles when it comes to Web3 entering, stores, especially Apple's App Store, because you have Apple that kind of wants to, take their cut on transactions, but they don't necessarily have, an Ethereum address or an HBAR account, so they can't really on some of these transactions. So there isn't a lot of, Web3 and Apple kind of don't mesh currently. And it's pretty evident seeing, it's unfortunate that you guys have to kind of eliminate certain features of your wallet to function in the App Store. And I'm kind of curious, like, you don't have to go too deep into it, but what's that experience like navigating that as a Web3 company? What are your thoughts on Apple's stance on these types of things? Is there any sense that you get of them maybe adapting a little more to Web3? I'm really curious to kind of look, getting a taste of what that situation looks like from your end as a developer.
Yeah. So my stance on this Apple stuff is just incredibly stupid, and it just makes no sense. And I think that I don't know if they don't understand kind of the burden that they're putting on these apps, or I just don't really get the motivation here. But so a bit of kind of background on what the situation is back in, I guess, end of October, I think, they decided that they wanted a 30% cut of anything involving NFTs, and that you had to use their in-app payment system for the fees. And if you're buying anything, you have to use the in-app purchase thing if it's using NFTs. And so I had a lot of back and forth with our app reviewers when we were kind of going through the approval process for our app, and it got to the point where, like, if I was sending an NFT to you, right, like it's a fraction of a penny, and they essentially just want a cut of that. Like it
So
doesn't
hold
matter.
on. So you're telling me Apple wants their 30% cut of a fraction of a penny, basically.
Yeah. I think it's more the principle
Right.
versus the amount, you know. But it made no sense to me, like how I could pay the Hedera network fee using the in-app purchase system. Like it just, I didn't see an actual way that's possible. And so they basically just told me then disable it. And I guess there's another feature, that the in-wallet swaps. You have to submit like a bunch of like documentation, like legal documentation saying we're like allowed to do swaps and stuff, like exchanges. But that's a bit out of our reach at the moment. But yeah, so it's mostly NFT stuff that is not allowed on iOS for us. So yeah.
Right. So again, there's a few ways we can chalk this up. Hashgraph's a disruptive technology, and you can look at it from the perspective of, for example, you buy a product for $1, Visa gets 50 cents. Everybody wants a cut at some point, and to a big extent, the technology space and Web3 included, like most industries, inefficiencies do drive a lot of revenue. And when you take that away and things get really good, almost too good, there definitely is resistance. Maybe they just don't understand this stuff. They probably do. But yeah, it's frustrating. And I think that for myself, it's like, it's so nice to have an iOS wallet because you have that on-device security, you've got, Face ID and all those different types of things. It's great hardware. It's a fantastic way to secure your stuff. But also it's like, you do want to use the browser extension or the web version just because you can do more stuff with it. So it's tough for you guys to promote that additional security when it comes at such a trade-off. It definitely is tough for you guys, but one thing that I do commend is like just moving forward with it. I think the only way that this stuff is going to change is if users can experience that and see that contrast and maybe provide a bit of, give a bit of pressure to these companies as we see the adoption of crypto growing. Because it's all digital wallets. Apple has their own digital wallet, Apple Pay. HashPack is just another digital wallet. So I think the space will change. It's going to take time. It's going too slow. But I want to move on to the rest of the news, but I have one more question before you go. I was interested we've seen a lot of new people hop into the Hedera space, the HBAR community, a lot of new HBAR-barians, Hederians. And a lot of those folks are building things on the network, and maybe they don't know where to start or understand, certain things to do or any pitfalls or stuff like that. So as somebody such as yourself that's, as you said, been developing specifically for the Hashgraph for, quite a while, is there what's your best piece of advice or some good advice you would give to someone planning to build on Hedera that's just kind of starting out, an indie developer? Maybe something you wish someone said to you when you set out to build HashPack. I'm curious if there's any kind of tidbits of wisdom you could pass on to some of these new folks in the community.
Yeah, I would start kind of by reading the Hedera documentation, just tip to tail, like the whole thing. Read every single thing in that Hedera documentation, understand what you can do with the network. Jump into the Hedera Discord and maybe ask questions if you have them. A big one is don't store your private keys on the front end. There's been a number of projects that have had their stuff stolen by storing the treasury keys in the front end. Do not do that. People will find them and steal all your stuff. And yeah, I mean, we're super open at HashPack. Like if you're building something, come ask questions. We got a developer channel that people ask questions all the time, like how do I do this? And yeah, it's pretty easy if you're kind of a semi-experienced developer. It's pretty easy to pick up. I would maybe put some warning to junior devs to maybe get a little experience under your belt before jumping into crypto stuff. Just because it is kind of like a layer on top of kind of normal development. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to approach compared to other chains.
Yeah, that's great. I think the takeaway from that is just, if you're starting out, be patient with yourself. This is a new technology, and Web3 is also new. So, be patient with yourself when you're developing. There are mistakes that you can make. Now, before I let you go, was there anything you wanted to plug or anything cool from HashPack that you wanted to mention, or any shout outs you wanted to give?
I try not to hype stuff up too far before it's ready to go, but we have a lot of exciting stuff in the hopper at the moment. So keep your eyes out for that. I mean, shout out to just everybody who's kind of used HashPack and like all the builders who have kind of helped us build this kind of vibrant ecosystem of dApps and NFTs and all this stuff going on. It's really something to be a part of that. So just thanks everybody.
That's awesome. And real quick before you go, I had someone leave a question in the spaces here. I think maybe it would be good for you. It's from Orbis86, and they ask, are we going to introduce any compatibility with EVM chains, especially with in-wallet swaps? I know that there's some dexes like Pangolin, and also like we got Hashport and stuff, but I think they're asking kind of like specifically in-wallet stuff. Are you guys going to be offering those kinds of kind of in-wallet swaps that are kind of EVM compatible? I imagine so at some point down the road.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been kind of exploring the Hashport stuff that they've been putting out lately. So like porting stuff over could be a thing soon. Not on our kind of immediate roadmap, but swap wise, I guess we kind of have to see how it goes. We would definitely like to kind of expand our in-wallet swap capabilities to handle more exchanges and more price feeds and all that stuff. There's a lot going on in the DeFi space. In terms of like other chains in HashPack, we don't really have anything to talk about on this subject at the time, but it's not out of the question. So who knows?
Right on. Okay. Okay. One sec. We got one more question. You're a popular guy, Tyler. One more question. Same person listing. Will bulk sender feature be available to send multiple NFTs to multiple wallets? Secure trade is limited to 8 or 10 at the moment, I believe. I guess what they're asking is, would you be able to do secure trade with more than 2 parties involved?
Yeah, so this secure trade limit is kind of like a technical limitation of the Hedera network. You can really only have like 9 or 10 asset transfers in a single transaction. Bulk sending, I don't want to give anything away yet, but we got some cool stuff coming up. So keep an eye out.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Tyler. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to send you back down to the listeners, and I'm going to invite up John from Bank Social. If you're still tuned in, I'd love to have you come up to talk quickly about ISO 20002. I know you had some thoughts on that. And basically, I'll just read John's tweet here real quick, because this is a conversation, for folks unfamiliar. SWIFT, global payment system, there's a new messaging standard. A lot of people are talking about other specific Web3 networks utilizing it and supporting it, and it's going to be so important. And there's a lot of confusion around, does Hedera support it, does it not? John's tweet says, for those on today's call, referring to a recent spaces, that thought Hedera was having to work around to provide ISO 20002 support, I'm here to tell you that's 100% wrong. Hedera is 100% compliant and with HTS no less, which is huge when you factor in the cost. It can support all the messages. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit. Like, do we have clarity around this? And I mean, it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, if I could, I'd like to just comment on a few of the things that I heard before, specifically with staking. Yes, are you okay with that, Brandon?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, quickly, just on staking, I think there are a lot of differences between the different ecosystems. The reason why I think, or sorry, not staking. I don't know why staking was in my head. The compatibility of people picking it up and integrating Hedera into their ecosystems. I'll tell you that when you compare it to something like Ethers JS, which is an EVM compatible, JavaScript library. The Hedera SDK, whether you're talking about the JavaScript SDK or the Go SDK, it's I would say it's an order of magnitude easier to learn than Ethers. And so when I look at kind of it from a business standpoint, I look at you've got all these EVM compatible chains. They build it one time, and then it's it's compatible with Polygon. It's compatible with Ethereum, BNB. They can kind of get 5-6 chains out of the way. So some of this might also be just their unwillingness to put something in that's going to really render a lot of the rest of the use cases here useless. So I think we got to, my point there is we kind of got to build it ourselves. And I think people are just going to naturally, by way of using it, use it. The other thing I was going to say is if you are building on iOS, we have a fully functioning wallet that we got on very quickly. We got approved in the iOS App Store very quickly that does NFTs. It doesn't do it on Hedera yet, but we didn't have any issues with. So I think it's a matter of how you approach it too. It's a matter of how you position yourself legally in the ecosystem. But okay, so on to ISO. So I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of different people about this, and I think a lot of people don't really understand what ISO is or ISO 2022. So let's talk about it. So first, it's old. It's not new. It's from 2004. Okay, ISO 2022 was first proposed in 2004, and it's been trying to gain traction ever since, and it never has. And the reason why it never has is because banks like kind of holding on to their own protocols. Chase wants everything to go through Chase, and Swift wants everything to go through Swift. And what blockchain DLT really did was it came in, and I think for the people that I respect in the space, we don't see ISO 2022 as something that is even relevant anymore. I want to say that first, okay? Now, having said that, do I think that people are using this as the reason why they don't want to use something? Yes. And so I think it's very important. And I've talked with the Hedera guys about this, several of the developers. They were more like, well, we don't need it. And I'm like, well, that's not a reason why you shouldn't say it's compatible because you don't want somebody to use that as a reason or an excuse of not to use it. And so what ISO 2022 is, it's a I think there's several hundred messages in it. I'm not sure on the exact count. And basically, each one of these different payload types is a message that defines a certain type of transaction. Now, some of these transactions can be large. The payloads can be very large. And so, the way I envision this and the way I've talked to the Hedera team, like when we go pitch this to people who want to use this protocol, and they want to use it for very cheap, and they want to do it on Hedera, utilizing HTS as a token, as a fungible and in a fungible and a non-fungible manner. You can essentially take a payload message, put it into an NFT, store that payload message on Arweave or IPFS, and put that into a fungible token that now ties out the entire payload for that ISO compliant message in any of the 200 or 250 or 275 different messages. And so when you compare this to the cost now of sending that type of message versus the traditional Rails, of course, depending on the payload size and the cost on IPFS and the cost on Arweave, But when you're comparing this with the traditional payment rails and the cost of these transactions, you're talking about, just for your standard transaction, you're talking about orders of magnitude less, especially when you can use the native HTS tokens as your rail mechanism for the payload. And on top of that, you can also build, so let's say you're building a CBDC or you're building a stable coin, you can also conduct the transaction of the stable coin. So if you've got a payload, if you've got a message that requires a payload and it's a type of transaction, not only are you able to get the payload message across, you're able to make the payment in the same transaction, you're able to store the message in any manner you need to satisfy ISO 20.22. And then it's all done within seconds. It's immutable, it's on chain, and it's orders of magnitude less cost. And the other thing here too is your cost structuring. I think that's another big advantage. I don't ever hear this, which I think we need to be bringing this up more as people who believe in Hedera, and as we pitch this to people. It's the fixed cost structure of Hedera. The fixed cost structure of Hedera on HTS it cannot be, we can't overstate its benefit in the market. When you're, as a business, able to project your exact cost of a transaction, there's no more powerful tool than being able to project your exact cost. And there's no other chain that exists right now where you could do that. There's no other chain. You can't go to Cardano. I've had discussions with Cardano developers where they're telling me, well, it's fixed in Cardano. It's not like ETH where the gas fluctuates and you don't know each transaction how much you're going to pay. So you kind of just have to wait and guesstimate and do your best to figure out if it's going to cost this much. On something like Ethereum, you're hitting it twice. You're getting hit twice. You're getting hit with the price of gas going up and down, or the actual cost of a transaction going up and down because miners are wanting more at this time versus last time, and you're getting hit with the cost of Ethereum jumping up and down. So you're getting hit in both places. And Ethereum's, it's whatever you want to call it price wise. I talk to Cardano devs and they tell me, yeah, well, it's fixed in Cardano. It's not like Ethereum, it's fixed in Cardano. Well, you still have the problem with the price moving with Cardano, right? And who knows as these things swing. So with Hedera, there's a tremendous advantage to being able to have a fixed price cost transaction of a hundredth of a penny, or whatever. If my math is off, it's wrong there. It's fractions of a penny, and it's the same every time. I know that I can price that out. So when we're talking about bringing businesses in, again, I want to be very clear that I think that ISO 20.22 for anybody who's building new, who's building in the who's kind of building looking forward. I think telling people that you're able to offer, so we do that. We tell people that if you want ISO 20.22, we can build stuff that's ISO 20.22. What I think that's more asking from a business perspective, from these outsiders looking in, is can you be a compliant system? And I think as a Hedera community, we have to understand and be able to say that yes, Hedera at its base stack level can be ISO 20.22. I would say though that we don't have to, and I think this is where I'll agree with the Hedera devs. They don't really like to say that it's ISO 20.22, and it's more about just a philosophy than a can it do it. It's not it can't do it. It's like we don't. I don't want to take that stance and say no. We shouldn't promote it. I think it should be promoted because again, these are the reasons why Swift's trying to create a position for themselves right now that says you need Swift. You need to be ISO 20.22 compliant for this to work. And I just don't think that not only is that not necessary, but I think we're going to find that as this goes along, that's going to be start to become something that it becomes less and less of a focus for these international transactions, international wires, international payments, all these different messaging types that come through. That was long-winded.
No, I appreciate it. I think it deserves a spotlight. And I mean, we're familiar with people within Hedera not really being upfront about whether it is or whether it isn't. I mean, lots of folks pointed to the recent interview Lehman did with BitBoy where he asked him the question. Lehman was kind of like, I don't even know what that is. So what you're saying is definitely, Hedera should take the stance that yes, it supports ISO, OT 2022, but we shouldn't be the situation where we say we don't, or we just don't bring it up at all. It should be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think, there's a fine line, because here's the thing is there's a fine line with promoting something that's kind of legacy. And I see ISO 2022 as being a legacy instrument. I've spent a lot of time building software that use these payload messaging standards. We used to use, I don't know if you guys have heard of fixed gateways. These are kind of still staying around in the brokering space. There are also EDI standards and specs for shipping and for logistics, and I think it's important for us to understand these because they're still in use and they're still going to be things that people rely on. And for us to say no, you got to do it a new way, it puts businesses on a back foot. And when I look at something, when I go in and I try to sell something, I don't try to sell them what I have. I try to sell them what they have, what they already used, just in a way that's more cost effective, less friction, easier to use, easier to implement. I certainly don't go in there and say, hey, you've got to throw away everything you've ever been doing and you've ever learned, because that's not the way that you get that's not the way that you get people to use computers. I mean, look at it's the very reason why I think iOS was, or not iOS, but Mac OS was built on Linux. They wanted to get all the builders, or not Linux, but a BSD version of Unix. They wanted to get all the real computer users who they knew would build real stuff, not the Microsoft point and click guys, to feel comfortable with their ecosystem, with their software. And so they built something that people were familiar with. And I think we can do the same thing. We can go to these people who are legacy builders in the space and help them understand that this is a new way to do things. And the other thing I would say, as far as like developers coming in and building in Hedera, it's the easiest one to build out of by far. There's nothing even close to it. I mean, with all the other networks, you've got to spin up either you have to spin up your own node, or you've got to pay for an Infura node or any other node, so that you can go out and get transactions and interact with the network. With Hedera, that's just built in. You don't have to do that. And so when you look at this as kind of, what is this a similar abstraction to? It's a similar abstraction to like a database. So building on top of a database, right? You have an abstraction layer, you've got some type of ODBC connector, or you've got some type of database abstraction layer, and you're building on top of that. And so I think we need to help people understand that that's really all you're doing here, is you're taking an abstraction, a data layer abstraction, and you're building on it. And yes, if you want to, if let's say you're in shipping, let's say with Avery Dennison, they're in shipping, right? And Atma, what they're doing with RFIDs. So we used to do all this stuff. We used to do it with EDI. And to go in and be able to tell these companies that are utilizing EDI that, yes, you can now do this immutably. So one of the big problems we used to have, just as a use case, I'm just going to throw out a use case here in shipping. So we used to build these multinational, huge retail network, omni-channel, with huge retailers, Polo, Toys R Us, I mean, massive retailers, okay? And even government entities, right? And so they would send files back and forth. They'd drop them on FTP servers, and then, you'd go pick it up, and then it would be taken off the FTP server, and then something would blow up, and then everybody's pointing fingers at each other. That world doesn't have to exist anymore. And Hedera can be the enabler of why that world doesn't have to exist anymore. And so again, when we go in and we tell these people that these systems can do that, Hedera can do this. It can build on top of these existing ecosystems. And it can do it in a way that doesn't make these guys feel like they're having to throw away everything they've learned for the last 20 or 30 years. I think that's super important when building something like this and getting mass adoption. If Oracle, if Microsoft and Oracle had to go in and say, look, it's not going to work like DB2 works, because DB2 had the 10-year head start on these guys, and you have to learn everything all over again, they wouldn't have made it. And so we kind of have to, have the same approach. And that's how we're having success, quite frankly, is we're able to come in, like I said, for example, with the shipping, being able to say, hey, now your shipping notice is immutably transferred on a ledger that whenever somebody needs to look, it's very easy to go back and say, no, it was your problem, or it was our problem, or it came in at this time, or it was processed at this time, or it had this data in it, it didn't have this data in it. That's the power that these ecosystems give us that we have to, especially Hedera, because now that's a fixed cost transaction. It's a 1 penny, it's a tenth of a cent transaction, or it's a couple cents transaction. Super important for us to be able to have these conversations with these large entities for adoption.
Those are great insights, John. I really appreciate you stopping by. Whenever I hear you talking about the stuff, I'm like, okay, different perspective. This you gotta loop things back into the old school, because that's kind of a lot of the results we're seeing with the network is being able to interface with some of these legacy systems and not need to reinvent the wheel, but throw some new tread on there and get going 0 to 60 faster.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to say about the new account ramp-ups is unique on Hedera that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And I think that this might change a little bit once you start having to pay rent. I think that's coming here pretty quickly. You're going to start having to pay rent for your account. I don't think it drastically reduces it. But one of the things that you can do on this network that is very hard to do on other networks is spin up and use accounts and throw out transactions, just even to test them on a mainnet. For $1, you can get thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions with thousands and thousands of accounts. And so you create these use cases in Hedera that really can't exist very many other places, especially when you talk about, all of the different types of, I really love HTS personally. I mean, that's one of the things that I think takes Hedera above all, HTS, because of the features that are built into the HTS tokens, the fact that you can do fungible and non-fungible, you can do fee structured tokens. I mean, there's so many options built into the HTS token, and the ease of use in the SDK, it's really like the paramount of where you'd want to be as somebody coming in and getting started with the best of all worlds options right at your fingertips. Super easy to set up. It's basically like, if you know how to use npm, you're like npm install Hedera SDK, and then with 10 lines of code, you're writing an application on Hedera. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of two things at once. It's a paradigm shift into the future, but then it's also backwards compatible with a lot of different legacy enterprise systems, which I think is like the appeal of the network. So I love it. John, I really appreciate you coming up. Thanks for stopping by. Hopefully we'll have you on another Spaces in the future. I've got to get onto the news. I was just looking at my list of stuff to talk about. So
all good, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Cheers. I really appreciate you stopping by. Okay. So let's get down to it. We're gonna cram this in. I appreciate everyone for hanging on. I know we're all waiting to figure out what else is going on. What the heck is going on? So let's dive into it. So recently, as recent as a couple days ago, Hedera published their 2022 community update. And it's great. I mean, it's on the Hedera blog. It was published on the 24th. And it's a great retrospective of what happened on the network. Anybody who is new to the Hedera ecosystem, this is super duper duper high level just on kind of like the state of Hedera as a network and as a brand. Go in, read it. It's a great way to kind of get caught up on the major things that went down. It is interesting reading it too, because when we look at the window of what they covered, it went up until kind of like mid-December. So it's kind of funny that the huge ramp up in TPS and all that stuff isn't really a part of this retrospective. So this truly is almost like you read up until kind of almost the end of an era, and now we're kind of in a new one on Hedera. So all the stuff I'm going to talk about, it's in the thread, pinned to the top of the Spaces. You can go in and read each of them. Again, if you're new to the ecosystem, read this piece. It's great. Big thing that happened over the weekend is Liithos Entertainment. It's a AAA gaming studio on Hedera. They're going to be launching a game called Ashfall within the coming years that's going to be leveraging the network. They are releasing comic books, and they've teamed up with a TikTok star, Michael Lee. I have to admit, I'm not on TikTok. Maybe I should be. I don't know. And, the guy's got 52.2 million followers. There's a comic book. He's in it. I mean, we've been talking about, are big influencers going to, start talking about Hedera, start talking about products on the network? Are accounts going to be created because of this exposure? Well, seems like that's happening. We've got 1,500 accounts being created every hour ever since this announcement came out. People are going in. They're grabbing these NFTs. You go in, if you've got Apple Pay, if you've got a credit card, you grab an NFT. So it's really neat. And there's two sides to this, as there usually is with a lot of this growth on the ecosystem, right? You can look at it as the perspective of what's happening outside of the network and what's happening inside the network, inside the ecosystem. So on the outside, a lot of these folks maybe don't even realize they're buying an NFT, right? They're buying a digital collectible. It's a comic book that has an influencer that they love. That's this new video game that's coming out that's exciting, right? That's great. When we look at it from inside the ecosystem, there's been a lot of feedback into how this is accomplished. If you want to buy this with HBAR, you've got to do some level of KYC. It's a little more convoluted. It's not ideal in comparison to, let's say, going to Turtle Moon Launchpad or Zeus or Hash Guild or Hedera Sentient or one of these other launch pads and minting an NFT. It's click, click, boom, but this is kind of what we're going to have to start to get used to, right? The way that's easiest for people outside of Hedera to get a hold of these, digital collectibles, it's not going to be what we're used to. It's because these larger institutions and brands and companies and influencers are meeting folks halfway, right? Doing something that they're used to. They have to be able to buy these collectibles with their credit card. And sometimes these platforms that you do it with aren't, what we're used to, but we're going to have to get used to it. This is what mass adoption, the baby steps look like. And we've heard people within the ecosystem talk about it. We've got Orbis 86 listening. Huge shout out to her and her team. Something that they talk about a lot is, we have to have these cross-chain discussions and continue growing. And that also extends out to beyond Web3, right? You have to meet people halfway. So shout out to Liithos, driving account creation. We will get there. Things will continue to improve and get better. But these are just the first steps. It's really cool. I mean, these little things are happening. Also, huge shout out to Hello Future Buzz and everyone else involved with the holiday community party that happened mid-December. A lot of those funds went to a great cause. They went to the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center, serving victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and child abuse, in San Marcos, Texas. And all of the, over 200,000 HBAR raised went to this organization. So that was great. I just wanted to highlight that yet again. Another holiday season passed, and the HBAR community came together and rallied for a great cause. So that's awesome to see. Also, too, again, another great resource for people that are new to the Hedera network that want to maybe see the scope from the enterprise side. Hedera did announce a new ecosystems page specifically highlighting enterprise use cases, which is great to see. And this is where you'll find Avery Dennison, Bank Social. We had John speaking just earlier from Bank Social. We've got FPost, we've got EM Tech, we've got Hala Systems, we've got LG, we've got Proven DB, we got ServiceNow, we got DLA Piper, we've got Fortune 500s, we've got startups. These are all companies that have use cases currently running on the network. So this is a great way for people to kind of crack open the network and see what's actually going on. They even have a tab called the Governing Council to see who on the Governing Council is doing stuff, and also just who's on the governing council. So this is a great resource, again, linked in the thread pinned to the top of the spaces for folks new to the network that just want to kind of, again, crack it open and see what is happening on the enterprise side. Now, moving forward, we've got some other interesting stuff happening. We have a new HIP coming, Hedera improvement proposal for mutable metadata on NFTs proposed by Patches from Turtle Moon Command Center. Basically, where NFTs are right now in Hedera, right, they're great. You don't have to use a smart contract. You mint them right to the L1. They act the same way that an HBAR would. But the limitation is they're immutable, right, by nature. So that means that the metadata and content within inside the NFT can't easily be updated after the fact. You'd have to do some kind of burning mechanism or something like that. What this new HIP proposes is the ability to update the metadata inside an NFT, which basically means that you would be able to change the NFT after it's minted. This is a really fascinating discussion that's happening around this HIP that I encourage people to participate in. And this is kind of a paradigm shift with NFTs on Hedera. Basically, when you collect an NFT, it's in your wallet, and it could change down the road from the collector, which is something that happens on other networks. It could happen on Hedera. So that's really cool. New HIP, check it out. Also, interesting update from EM Tech, which is focused on CBDCs. And they recently did some presentations at, I think it is We Day. We Day. And basically, there is a organization called WePay in the Caribbean, and EM Tech, which CEO Carmel Cadet talks about a couple things that they're working on and finally shed some light on some of these different things. EM Tech is focused on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, but focused on developing economies and other economies that want to go in a different direction as they move forward into something potentially more progressive or more focused on DLT. Hedera is used as a component of these networks. And quickly, I wanted to highlight a couple things that she was talking about on a recent Twitter Spaces that was hosted by the HBAR Foundation. A couple things she was talking about is they are working on a digital dollar project. They're working on stable coins backed by CBDCs. They're working on cross-border payments between CBDCs and unprecedented liquidity mechanisms. This is big stuff, and we've been following EM Tech for a long time. I would like to dive into it a little more, but we are short on time. But what I will say is, this is linked in the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the spaces. I do encourage people to go. There is about I'd say 2-minute clip from that Twitter Spaces shared by the HBAR Bull, where Carmel talks about some of these different components. It's really interesting, the stuff they're working on. It can't be understated how important it is, and it is a really crucial use case for the network. People talk about CBDCs a lot, love them or hate them. They're happening. And also these kind of government-backed stable coins, right? If you look at, for example, the U.S., the thought of a U.S. digital dollar that maybe isn't a CBDC, but just, a government-backed stable coin to potentially be used as a clearing layer for payments, all these different types of things, EM Tech is kind of at the center of when it pertains to Hedera. So definitely keep an eye on that stuff. Listen to that clip. It's really interesting. Christian Hasker, Chief Marketing Officer for Swirled/Hedera, tweeted something out that is reminiscent of some bold statements made by folks in those kind of inner circles. He tweets out, quote, "The Hedera network is on track to process 1 billion transactions every 20 days at its current pace. But at some point in the future, I believe it will be processing that volume every 20 minutes. That's pretty bold. On one side, I go, yeah, sure. if we look at what's proposed by the network and what we expect and what's been laid out since the beginning, for sure. But, but also at the same time, be careful, Christian. I mean, we had Mance tweet out about a step function 8 months ago. We've had people make some pretty bold claims that take a long time to work up to. So, if you're feeling optimistic, by all means. But I think that, we do have to continue to be careful. The branding tagline is all substance, no hype, or hype, substance over hype. So this is pretty hype. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty hype. This is a pretty hype tweet, Christian, and hopefully there's substance behind it. I think there is. I think we all know there is. But think about that. 1 billion transactions every 20 minutes. It's kind of wild to think about. There's a part of us that kind of go like, yeah, we'll get there. But also at the same time, it's like, it's a little early. So we'll have to see. The other thing too, we talked about it with Tyler earlier from HashPack about the reception that the recent step function has garnered from people outside of the Hashverse, the Hedera world. And, it's the service is called the Hedera Consensus Service. Maybe it's poor naming, but obviously when you have 90% of the transactions for this network utilizing the Hedera Consensus Service, I understand folks outside of Hedera without knowledge of the network going, hey, that's like Solana, right? Solana counts these messages between validators and nodes as that TPS count, which you can't really classify as transactions. There's no transfer of value. With Hedera, all of these Hedera Consensus Service transactions are transferring actual HBAR, right? So these are transactions happening. And I think, again, it's just really when you pull back, it's blockchain and Hashgraph. Two very, very different technologies. And there's just a lack of knowledge about Hashgraph right now. So we're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to, prepare for a lot of these different types of conversations happening. But again, like the HBAR Foundation and Hedera have said, there will be use cases that do use a high volume of Hedera token service transactions, right? Atma.io just happens to utilize HCS. There will be, high volume use cases that do leverage HTS. So it won't be like this forever. We got to just suck it up. We got to meet people with empathy. We got to educate, and we got to have some class. We got to have class, folks. And the other thing is, let's take a look here. This is where we get into some interesting stuff. On the Hedera subreddit, right? This is a really cool community on Reddit for Hedera. Someone made a post that kind of jogged my memory. They said, quote, "Did I miss something? Whatever happened to the news of a possible Fortune 10 company being involved with Hedera?" Right? Interesting. Last year, Lehman was on a webinar for something I can't remember. And he mentioned that Hedera has a Fortune 10 use case coming, right? Now, quick refresher. Who's in the Fortune 10 right now? So let's see, Fortune 10 list. We've got, we got Walmart, Amazon, Apple, CVS Health, ExxonMobil, Alphabet, Berkshire Hathaway, right? We've got these massive, massive companies. Is Walmart building a use case? Is Amazon building a use case? Is Alphabet building a use case? Google's on the governing council. But still, my heart, is Apple building a use case? We don't know, right? We just don't know. But Lehman said that a Fortune 10 use case is building. And a reminder that it was purported that it would be the first quarter of 2023. Here we are. Let's see what happens. It's another spinning plate up in the air that we're just kind of keeping track of and seeing what's going on. So it's one to follow, one to circle back on. To be honest with everything happening, kind of forgot about it. Saw it on Reddit and I was like, that's another thing to keep an eye on. Is it one of these step function contributors, right? Is it a high transaction throughput use case? Is it still happening, right? It's been a month and it's been purported that 80 use cases are going to go live on the network in the first quarter. Well, we're a third way through the first quarter. What's going on, right? We gotta stay realistic. We gotta keep an eye on things. On the topic of hardware wallets and staking and all these different types of things, as I was talking with Tyler from HashPack, there are limitations to these. Companies like Ledger, are sometimes slow to roll on developing for the Hedera network. Well, we do know about a hardware wallet called Citadel Wallet building, specifically for the Hedera network and will support all different aspects of the network, all different types of transactions, not just the three types of transactions that Ledger will support, but all of them. And Citadel Wallet recently published their documentation, or maybe it's not specifically documentation, but they detail an introduction, motivation, use cases, and certain wallet specs, all these different types of things. They're different things for their SDK and APIs and stuff are noted to be coming soon as well. So very, very cool. And definitely encourage people to check that out. Also an interesting piece of news highlighted by Zenobia from Swirlds. Proven DB, right? That is a company that used to be built on Ethereum and moved to Hedera, has now been acquired by OneSpan. So that's really cool, right? A company built on Hedera and utilizing the network. Proven DB has now been acquired. So we're starting to see some of these ripple effects into the spaces outside of Web3 with traditional enterprise leveraging Hedera, and starting to see some of these mergers and acquisitions and movements, which are really interesting to see, right? A Hedera-powered company acquired by another company. Interesting news. Zeus Market just passed 125 million HBAR transacted. Let's see what it's at right now, because sometimes you can get a sense of the speed at which the marketplace is moving. We're at about 126.6 million HBAR transacted now, total volume. That's pretty big. Zeus Market has been around for, I guess, a year now, almost exactly. So where are we headed from here? When do we hit 250 million? Some folks are saying that could happen within a month, a couple months. Some folks are saying it might take a little longer. But again, when we look at the shifting fundamentals of the network, the spike in account creation, the spike in transactions, how will that expedite some of these different milestones? We're just going to have to see. Upcoming DEX, Pangolin, which is a large DEX on Avalanche, right? Another L1, is coming to Hedera. They were set to launch on the 24th or the 23rd. I believe it was the 24th. And there were delays. It's understandable, right? If people recall, Saucer Swap experienced about a week delay launching, right? So delays happen, and Pangolin is set to launch tomorrow, Monday. And we've talked about it in the past. I just wanted to highlight that there is an update from them, and that DEX is launching tomorrow. It's an interesting DEX because it allows people on Avalanche to interface with the Hedera network, access some of these assets, and we may see some influxes of liquidity coming over to the Hedera ecosystem. It's very interesting and very cool. So shout out to Pangolin. I'm happy to see things back on track. A couple episodes ago, I did have Scruffy on from Pangolin having a conversation. Go listen to that episode. I think it was like episode 60 or something. Check it out. So this was also something really, really interesting that honestly flew under the radar for me, but caught my attention because Rob Allen from I believe the HBAR Foundation tweeted out some responses to an update. And basically he said the following, and I'll just kind of read these 3 tweets, a little bit of a back and forth between him and another community member that kind of got me a little excited. So recently there were some updates in regards to Australian Payments Plus, which is a provider. We also have FPOS and the Connect ID and all these different types of things, really kind of starting to see this focus on Australia and those payment systems and how big Hedera may actually be in Australia when it comes to payments. And so Rob Allen tweets, quote, Australian Payments Plus is the new merged organization that includes FPOS, New Payments Platform, NPP, that is real-time payments, and BPay, the Australian bill payment scheme. This is the entire Australian payments industry, winky emoji. So Twitter user Sam Leiden13 responds, so, quote, Hedera is basically going to be providing the digital infrastructure for the entire Australian financial system. Nice. When you also show NAB the light and get them to come over to Hedera too, it's going to be game on. And Rob Allen says the game is definitely afoot. So, really, really interesting movement here. Really interesting stuff. We now know that Hedera is going to have a much bigger presence and involvement in the Australian payment infrastructure, including bill payments and all those different types of things, than we originally understood, and especially FPOS, right? Being a governing council member, it's just a really interesting situation to look at, one that I'm going to keep my eyes on, and we're just going to have to see as it evolves. Also, our last story of the day, one that came in just today, a little bit of breaking news. Also, speaking of breaking news, as I've been running the show, I have seen hashtag HBAR NFTs trending on Twitter, which we have seen over and over again. So that's really, really cool. I did see Rob Allen respond to this tweet as well. So this is really interesting. So Tollum Earth is it's basically an AI-driven market maker for the carbon offset markets. So last week I had Matt from Dovu on talking about carbon offsets, why the way that things currently work is not sustainable, why technologies like Hedera Hashgraph are going to reinvent the industry and make things more transparent, trustworthy, all these different types of things, and how the Guardian comes in and brings things all together. If for more details, definitely go back and listen to last week's episode. But Tollum Earth tweets out, quote, demand for a credible, transparent platform for buying and selling carbon offsets at scale has never been higher. Meet Tollum Earth, the marketplace for high-quality, high-impact offsets to help organizations achieve their goals. And again, Rob Allen replies, quote, Tollum Earth is the key to the entire Guardian ecosystem on Hedera, an AI-driven market maker matching supply with demand for carbon credits and all other nature and environmental digital assets at Hedera's speed, security, transparency, and low cost. This is, all caps, the game changer. So we've heard Rob Allen talk about in previous interviews how important ESG use cases and carbon offset credits specifically are to the growth of the network, how high in demand they are for these different kinds of economies and enterprises. So Tollum Earth, they've got a teaser video out, and they're basically going to be a massive pillar of infrastructure for ESG use cases on Hedera. And they had a big announcement today, and you should check it out. You should stay up to date on it. This is, I think, really when we look at this kind of enterprise mass adoption of the Hedera network, ESG use cases are kind of the tip of the spear. So that's something to keep in mind on. But wow, what an episode. Holy camole. And we covered a lot. We spoke to Tyler from HashPack, CTO of HashPack, about staking on Ledger hardware devices coming, right? Being able to stake your HBAR in your Ledger. That should be coming live in 2 months. Also, we spoke to John from Bank Social about the ISO 222 messaging standard. I learned that was something that was instated in 2004. So that's obviously top of mind for so many people, especially with Swift announcing that those requirements are going to come into play in March. All these different big top level things. And then we have Ashfall, right? We have these ESG use cases. We've got the retrospectives because we're in a new year. We've got mutable metadata. We've got CBDC news from EM Tech. All these different types of things. We still are waiting on the Fortune 10 use case this quarter. All these different types of things. It is just another big week. When I started these spaces over a year ago, it was a struggle sometimes to fill the hour. I'm at an hour and 40 minutes now. And I never anticipated guests, right? Having guests on the show would be an element of this show, right? I just got on spaces and I talk about the news, sign off, all that kind of stuff. Now I've got guests on the show. I've got people messaging me asking to be guests on the show and all these types of things. So it's really grown. And I mean, when someone messages me and they want to be on the show, I don't, feel free to do so. I'm not necessarily going to have you on the show, to be honest. There's a lot of people that are, top of mind and generate a lot of buzz, and it would probably be, beneficial to have them on the show. But as I've said many times before, the show's just kind of an excuse for me to stay up to date. It sounds a little selfish, but it's hard to keep up with all this stuff. And the whole reason I do this show is literally just to force myself personally to keep up with what's happening in this space. If I didn't have this show, I probably wouldn't know what's going on. And I really appreciate all you guys tuning in. And I think that having guests on the show has been great. And I want to have guests on the show that are going to answer questions that I have. I'm just another community member and I have my own questions. And I just happen to have a show that people really love and tune into. So that means I'm allowed to reach out to some of these people and say, hey, there's something happening and I think you have some answers to some questions. You want to be on the show? And it's not always going to be people that, other people are having on other shows, but I think it's people that can provide some insights and some useful information, some actionable information on just stuff happening in the ecosystem for the week. And that's one thing that's just, I want to, express my gratitude and everything for, because people tuning in and listening to the show, it means I can reach out to some of these people and get answers, and do stuff like have Tyler on the show and ask him about staking and what's going on. And all these questions that I have that probably other people have, just get answers to them. It's not that hard. It's just people talking together. And it's not about people pitching or, getting, saying, hey, check out this project or check out this project or whatever. It's just sharing information. It's just asking questions. It's just knowing how things work. That's all we're trying to do. So I just, again, I also have gratitude for people that take the time out, like John and Tyler and all the guests that I've had that, maybe don't necessarily have something to plug or, are doing a tour of spaces. They just take some time out of their day to hop on and answer my questions. So I really appreciate that. So I'm a curious HBARbarian. I've got a show that people listen to, and I just love being able to have people on and get information that hopefully is, helpful and useful to other people as well. And, people keep tuning in, and I really appreciate it. So takeaway for the week, what is it? I think that, there's a lot going on, and a lot of people are focused on price. A lot of people are focused on the economy, and rightly so. But I think what's important is look at the test net. Look at the mainnet. There's a great website, Metrika, Metrika, Metrika. You go on there, and it's like a little dashboard where you can see what's happened on the network in the last day, week, month, year, and just understand what actually technically is happening on the network. What are people using? What NFTs are popular? What tokens are popular? How many accounts are being made? In these early days of Hedera, I think this is more important to watch than price. And it's very useful to be well versed in some of these terms, right? Like TPS or HCS topics. What is that? Well, check out this dashboard, understand what's going on, because understanding what a topic ID is on Hedera is just as important as understanding, what the price is, in my opinion. And there's also the testnet. As Lehman Baird said, watch the testnet, because what happens on the testnet will probably happen on the mainnet at some point. And we've been watching the testnet run at sometimes thousands of transactions a second, right? We did see it running last year at hundreds of transactions per second. And guess what? Shocker. The mainnet is now running at hundreds of transactions per second. I'm running out of breath. And it's as simple as that. That's my main takeaway. Watch the network. Watch the actual technical fundamentals of the network. Stay up to date with that stuff. Learn about that stuff. It's like Tyler said from HashPack. If you're developing, read the documentation for development, right? Beginning to end. This is the time to absorb information and understand how this stuff works, because the more you know, the better decisions you're going to be able to make. And it'll put you ahead of other people because you understand what's going on, right? And with that, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Hashgraph News and Rumors, episode 62. Ledger is coming. On Twitter Spaces, where we talk about the top stories covering everything related to HBAR and Hedera Hashgraph every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Add it to your calendar. We do this every week. Share it around. The more, the merrier. Make sure to join the Hashgraph enthusiast Twitter community to share your insights, ask questions, invite new friends. Again, that's also linked in the thread pinned to the top of the Spaces here. And if you'd like to see the growth of the show and support that, feel free to send an HBAR donation to enthusiast.hbar, brought to you by listeners like you. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'll see you next Sunday. Again, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. You can check out the rest of my stuff on itsbrandond.com. And as usual, I'm going to leave this Spaces open for a few more moments so everyone can follow each other. If you see somebody you don't recognize, follow them, right? If you see someone you do recognize, tap their profile, see what they've been up to, reach out, say hello, stay connected. That's what this is all about. Everybody knows something that you need to know. Let's share the knowledge. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. Hello, future. Goodbye, past.